Stella Ting Toomey was born on May 22nd of 1952 in Hong Kong, so she'd be about 64 years old right now. In the summer of 1972, she decided that she wanted to come to the United States to begin her college career. She got accepted to 3 different universities, but couldn't differentiate between the 3 because I don't think she had ever been here before. So she randomly chose which school to go to by writing each of the 3 universities' names down on a sheet of paper and then randomly picking one of them. Actually, to be more specific, she had her younger brother, who was 9 at the time, randomly choose one of the sheets of paper. So as a result, she ended up attending the University of Iowa. And while she was at the University of Iowa, she studied mass communications, and she describes this as being intense, creative, fun, and hands-on. Throughout her schooling, she began to develop deeper questions and wanted to find out more in-depth answers that her undergraduate degree couldn't necessarily answer for her. She eventually ended up getting her master's degree and then continued on further with her schooling and got her PhD at the University of Washington. And while attending the University of Washington, she discovered that there seemed to be a bias towards the individualistic Western way of managing intimate conflict. And because she didn't necessarily agree with this bias, that's where her main theory stems from, is this disagreement that she had with it. The theory that she ended up developing is called the face negotiation theory. It's the culture one is born into will have an impact on how that individual responds to conflict in different situations. Stella mentions holding face with their identity or in their culture, and that the face is the social status or image that the public refers to. So keeping a positive and healthy face, quote unquote, is very important in this theory. The factors in negotiation of face: there's concern over self-face and others' faces. It's important to understand the significance of face for an individual and how important it is to maintain a face, which in turn will reflect on the others. So people from a collectivist culture usually avoid or integrates the conflict, while more individualistic people dominate the conflict as to maintain an independent face in the society. So just to briefly highlight what a collectivist and individualistic society look like. An individualistic society depends upon the values of freedom and independence, while a collectivist society depends on group harmony and consensus. So since they're mentioned quite often and they're important factors in her theory, I just thought I would give a little brief definition of what those are. So going back to her theory, another factor in negotiating face is status in the society, which generates power. So in a collectivist society, people are born into certain status quos and their individuality is less concerned. And then in a more individualistic society, people earn their power to live in that society. So they're not just born into it. So next, moving on, the face negotiation in different cultures. So face negotiation can be applied in the study of all types of interpersonal relationships and how it is applicable across all cultures, just because everyone has experienced conflict in some way or another, no matter what the country is from. So in the Western countries, they have more of an individualistic culture, and in Eastern countries, they have a collective or group culture, and they honor community. But one thing that should really be noted is that there are societies in these countries which follows another culture. So for example, people in Western societies might follow the collectivist society. They might follow more of like a collectivist approach, even though they're from a Western country or something like that. As well as vice versa, where people in a collectivist society might follow the quote-unquote like Western individuality way of doing things, and therefore it prevents this theory from being 100% accurate, and it's not always practical. This like cultural classification is not always practical in this context. So Stella also mentions that there's 5 types of conflict styles. There's domination, which is an individualistic approach to make decisions by dominating or controlling. This is an example of something that people in the United States use more frequently. Then there's avoiding, which is a collectivistic approach of staying away from the conflict and just ignoring that it's even happening, kind of just turning like a blind eye to the situation. Then I apologize if I butcher this word, but I'm pretty sure it's called obliging, which is a collectivistic approach of giving up to the situation and just like not even, I don't want to say you're not caring anymore, but you don't see the point in even pursuing it anymore. You just, like I said, you give up. And this is an example of something that maybe people in China or South Korea might do. And I think one common reason why people might end up doing this is because, as mentioned earlier, there's that status quo, and people in a collectivist society, as mentioned earlier, are sometimes just born into the power. So people from a lower class might not even be able to resolve conflicts with these people because they're not even in the same class system, so it wouldn't make sense. So they just give up just because there's no point in even continuing on with the conflict or a disagreement because they're in different class systems. Another conflict style is called compromising, and that's an individualistic approach to negotiation to come to a solution. And this is, I think that we see this quite often in the United States, especially with just meeting people halfway when you are not necessarily agreeing with the situation. So you're just going to meet them halfway so both of you guys can kind of have a semi-happy resolution to the conflict. And then the last one is called integrating, which is another individualistic approach to work together to reach a solution. So you're not necessarily meeting them halfway or compromising, but both parties are working together to resolve the conflict. So that about wraps up Stella's face negotiation theory. So moving on now, where is Stella? So she is now the author and editor of over 15 different books. Last time I checked, she had published 17 books, but it could be more now just because the article I'd read that on, it was a few years old, so she may have published more since then. She's also published over 100 journal articles, so she's remained pretty productive within the last few years. She's spoken about her work in multiple different countries, for sure the United States, Europe, and Asia. I believe she's also spoken Canada about it. And even though her work days are sometimes as long as 15 hours a day, she doesn't take credit for her hard work and all that she's accomplished in the field. She claims she is simply just doing her job, which I think shows how humble she's remained throughout the experience and just how genuine she is as a person too, just because she's not rubbing it in people's faces that she is this brilliant scholar, which is cool to see. So if you'd ever like to contact Stella, you can call her phone at that number provided. You can email her, and she is also on Facebook. Originally, when I found out that I had her as my scholar, I wasn't necessarily expecting any of them to be alive. That might sound really sad and everything, but when you're looking at the list of the people, there was Aristotle and other people like that, so I didn't think some of these people were even still alive. So when I realized that she was, it was kind of cool to actually see her in person and be able to watch videos of her and everything like that, just because I hadn't been expecting that. I hadn't expected to even find her on Facebook either, which I definitely looked at her Facebook wall and stuff, which was kind of cool. And then I did shoot her an email too, as well as try to reach out to her through phone, because I thought it'd be very cool to try and get an in-person interview with her if she would have had time. But since it's the summer, I don't think she's in her office or really checking her email for that matter, so I haven't been able to actually contact her. But if I ever do get a hold of her and this class is still going on, I'll try to set up an interview and maybe post something in D2L or something like that, just because I think it'd be pretty cool to hear some more thoughts on her, because there was obviously articles and stuff on her, but it'd be nice to get more in-depth answers from her and just figure out more, maybe random facts about her or something like that as well. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. So some last advice from Stella. She says to work hard and have fun with your career. Since she worked 15-hour days for much of her career, if she wouldn't have been having fun and enjoying what she was doing, those long work days would have sucked, to say the least, because if she would have hated it, she would not have been able to do as much as she would not have been able to accomplish as much as she has done already, just because she wouldn't have been as involved and focused on it because she wouldn't have necessarily cared about what she was doing. So have fun and be passionate about what you're doing as well, because then those long days won't seem as long to you. And then to summarize even further, she says to be well grounded in a particular field's research and to be ready to think and read across boundaries, but have a clear focus on a particular intercultural theme with more depth. And she again stresses to focus on a specific theme, or you won't make a very big difference within the field's research, just because, there's been probably thousands of people, if not more, that have studied certain aspects of communications, but if you're just focused on the general aspect of things, you're not necessarily going to make a difference because you're not getting more in depth and really challenging some of those smaller theories as well. She also says to be creative, imaginative, and have self-discipline, because if you're not any of these things, if you're not creative and imaginative, how are you actually going to be differentiating yourself from the others? Like, you have to really think outside the box and get creative with how you're viewing these theories and stuff, as well as just in any sort of field that you end up working in. And again, having self-discipline is important in any field, regardless if you want to become a scholar or not, just because if you're working your long days and everything, you're going to need self-discipline to have you keep going. So she also says to care about your work, have fun, and love what you're doing. She says to take risks, because once you're grounded, you can afford to be a little bit lighthearted with certain situations. So that was Stella Ting Toomey. Again, if you guys have any questions about her, I would love to answer them. Shoot me an email or chat me on D2L or something like that. So anyway, thank you for listening and have a nice rest of your day.